Okay, welcome back. Welcome back. Day 4 of your Igen4 training. We're talking about operating the press today. So, we've already gone over the paper path. We've gone over um, the components of the machine, and we've gone over the software, both the PSIP and the DFE. So, now we're just going to talk about the responsibilities of an operator and what does it look like to be an Igen operator. This would be similar to any other press you might run, but you are essentially in the Igen world, you are going to be loading paper in the feeder at a very basic level. You're going to be loading paper in the feeders while you're programming them on the PSIP. Then you're going to be setting up and releasing jobs at the DFE. And that's going to cycle up the press. The press is going to run whatever you set it to. Once the job is completed, the press will cycle down, assuming there's no other jobs pending. And then you're unloading the jobs out of the stacker. So, and while the machine is running, you have your active status list, which is going to tell you if something is needed. Let's say yellow toner is empty. Now you can replace the yellow toner bottle. Or it may say add carrier. You can add carrier. It may say, waste bottle full. You can replace the waste bottles. Currently, in the Igen4, the toners and the carrier and the waste developer bottle can all be done while the press is running. The waste toner bottle cannot, but the waste developer bottle, which fills up faster than the waste toner bottle, carrier is needed on an ongoing basis. You're going to be adding carrier every shift. Or you could potentially add a whole bunch and let it run for a while, but still every day probably, if you're going to be adding carrier, depending on your number of impressions in a day. But probably if you're running full production around the clock, you're going to be adding a lot of carrier. And you have a certain window of time while the press is running that you can replenish these things. If that time expires, the press will cycle down and wait for you to do it. It's like, no, I really need carrier. No, I really need this toner, or else I can't print. Right? So it'll cycle down and stop. But as an operator, you can do these things while the machine is running. What else are you going to be doing? Well, you're going to be inspecting the finished product. You should have already inspected it before you started printing the whole job. But you're going to inspect it before, after, and during. If you have a large run, you should probably check on sheets as they run for any image quality problems that could be newly appearing or getting worse. If you have something that's borderline, it's something you want to keep an eye on, because it may get worse while you're running. So the other things you'll be responsible for, doing maintenance, right? And we haven't talked only a little bit about maintenance. We haven't gotten into actual maintenance procedures. We'll get into that later. But you'll be responsible for doing the maintenance on this machine. So, and the maintenance is necessary to keep the image quality good. And yeah, I mean, essentially that's it, right? It's image quality, I guess function of the machine, but not really. I mean, a lot of these things can last a long time if you really don't care what it looks like. It might not work eventually, but yeah, functioning, image quality. So you'll be aware of the maintenance interval schedules, and the machine will help you. You know, say something is due soon or whatever, and that it helps you to know what is needed. You'll be responsible for the parts inventory for the press. You may or may not be responsible for ordering parts or making sure parts are getting ordered or taking in the inventory, but you'll be responsible for handling the inventory at the very least. Now, you may have a company that has a larger staff where you have individual roles that handle inventory stuff, paper inventory especially. The parts are all Xerox parts, and they're for the Xerox press. So you're the only one that's going to be handling them, you know, with the exception of other operators. But you may have people that, you know, receive this inventory and log it into a system. And so you may not have a lot of responsibility when it comes to that stuff, but it depends. It depends on the company you work for. Paper inventory you might not have anything to do with, but if it's a smaller company, you might have a lot to do with it, because you know it's to your advantage to understand paper, to understand how to handle paper, how to cut down paper, how to cut a finished job after it's out of the press. Right, so paper can sometimes come in large parent sizes that is well beyond the ability for this press to handle. But you can cut it down into smaller sizes in order for the Igen to handle. But if you work for a company, you may have a cutter operator that does that. And so you may never gain the experience of cutting paper yourself. It all depends. But it certainly is helpful to learn that. It's not terribly difficult. If you can run an Igen, you can certainly learn how to operate a cutter. But it's just something that at some point you may want to, you know, hang out with a cutter operator and get to, you know, practice cutting, just to get the idea for the process of cutting and sort of what to look for. Because you're going to be handling this stock, and if there's any defects with the stock before you get it, right, if the cutter operator makes a mistake in cutting, it can affect the press. If the blade is real dull, you know, it can leave a lot of paper dust, or sometimes the stock will stick together, and these will cause jams. They'll cause more. So it's just something that having the knowledge is just helpful. Same thing with after the product is printed, you may have to cut it down. you may have to cut it down. Or it may be helpful to cut it down so you understand what a cutter operator is looking for, what makes it easier to cut so that there's less mistakes down the line. So print production has several steps in it, and if any point any of this fails or mistakes are made, it has to come back to you to print it again, right? And that's waste. Nobody likes that, right? That's what you're trying to avoid in a print environment, is excess waste. So communication between other departments or other operators of other machines is helpful. You know what to look for, what are they like, in order to be able to do their job the best that they can do it. These are important things that sometimes, it's just not stressed enough. You have a breakdown in communication, everybody's disgruntled, and then the product, you end up wasting way too much, and it's no good, right? Okay. So the basic level, these are the things you're responsible for. The image quality, so you're keeping an eye on the printed material, and just knowing when it's your time to get your hands dirty and do the maintenance. It takes time. It just takes time to understand when what you need to do, when you need to do it. But observing is the start, right? You have to watch, you have to pay attention to what you're doing. Okay, so that's a very basic understanding of operator responsibilities. Beyond that, you'll be communicating in some ways. It really depends on the company you work for, right? You'll be communicating with a supervisor of some sort, probably a manager or supervisor that is, say, okay, we need this has to be done on a schedule, right? By Thursday, whatever, it's got to go out. All that information helps you know what you're working on, and as you master the press, you're going to know, okay, I need this amount of time in order to make that possible. And you might have to rearrange the print schedule. I mean, it depends who you work for. Some people really want you to stick to a schedule, but as a competent operator, I will run it the way it needs to be run. I don't care what the schedule is. It's going to get done, but the way that I do it is the right way, because I've figured out how long it takes, how much maintenance it's going to take. I know this press well to know, if you give me a bunch of jobs, I'm going to tell you what order they're going to be done in. It all depends on the health of the press. Depends on the maintenance that I've already done, the maintenance that is still pending. We're always in between. You're always in between some kind of maintenance, right? It's not going to be perfect for a long period of time. It's going to be perfect for a small window, and then you're going to have to keep working on it to make sure that it gets back to that good window again. But depending on what you're running, you may have jobs that your image quality artifacts are not even going to show up on. Okay, so run those first, and the stuff that is needed, the stuff that requires me to do maintenance, I'll do toward the end, if possible, right? Occasionally, sometimes the customer needs it immediately, like this has to go now, or because there's a a large finishing process that's following you, right? It's not just getting cut down. It's got to get, made into something fancy that takes a lot of time and labor, right? Sometimes those kind of things happen where, the boss is saying this has to be the number one priority because it's got to go on that press, and that press afterwards, it's got to get shipped. It's got, a bunch of people have to handle this after you. So we have to do this now. We have to do this now. And then there's a risk, a manager has to factor in risk. What happens? How much time do we have? What happens if one of these steps fails and it has to get sent back to the press? Can we afford that risk? So let's say you're printing, I'll keep it simple. Let's say we're printing a brochure, right? It's a trifold brochure, right? So it's just a single piece of paper, but it still has to get creased and it has to get folded and it has to get mailed a certain way or whatever. It has to get shipped a certain way. And it has to be out by the end of the day. So, the boss, the manager, supervisor, whoever has to figure that kind of thing out. Well, I need this to be printed immediately because of these extra steps: cutting, scoring, folding, and shipping. And if the cutter operator, the scoring, the folding operator, or the shipping mishandles or somehow botches the job, then it has to get reprinted, right? It's a loss of time. So, can they, is that something worth risking? All right. This is sort of the responsibility of a manager or supervisor. So it's going to come back to you. The press is not the first step because you have pre-press, right? First, you need a file. Once you have a file, you're the first one to go on the production floor to start working on product. So after you, there could be no steps or there could be several steps of finishing. And if any of those steps fail, it comes back to you. You say, well, I did my job perfectly, but they messed it up, right? And now it's back to me. I have to do more work. It's not fair, right? Well, that's the way production works. So everybody has the same problem. They're trying to eliminate waste without sacrificing quality and being as time efficient as possible. I'm trying to be as productive as possible. I don't want to ruin the product. I don't want to make it bad, ugly, or whatever blemishes, or I don't want to make it, have bad image quality. And I don't want to botch the job entirely and have all this wasted paper, time, materials, right? So you have that same responsibility as an operator. I want to be as efficient as possible, time efficient as possible. Production, the Igen doesn't have multiple, with the exception of enhanced permanence mode, which you won't really use. You probably will never use, but it's only for that one special case. But with the exception of that, the Igen doesn't have alternate speeds. The speed is based on the size of the paper. If a smaller paper, it can run more sheets, right? But it's the same speed of the press. So you can't go any faster, right? So you have to know how long does this job take on average, right? how long does this job take? Well, what paper is it on? Once you know the paper, you know how long it takes, because the Igen only has the one speed. So the same is true of well, I mean, other finishing machines, they might have different speeds. It depends. Anything that's done by hand, where it requires, manual handling of the product, maybe they're folding it by hand or whatever. That's an individual human speed. So yeah, I mean, in those cases, you could go faster or slower. But at the press, there is no faster or slower. It's you as an operator getting the most done, being the best. Understanding how long it takes each job to run. What's the health of my press? Am I going to be able to squeeze that in? Like, all that is your skill. That is your efficiency. Okay. So communication with your supervisor, that's the kind of communication you have. You might, it depends on the facility, you might have to communicate with other operators of other machines. I think it's always a good idea, because in my experience, the management doesn't always give you the right messages. You want to know directly, like, what is going on? Why are we failing? Why is, this, what do you need? What keeps you happy in order to do your job? If I know that, I can help. I can make sure that gets done. Obviously, it's tough when you're under the gun, so to speak, and you're just trying to hurry up and get something done, and you don't necessarily think too far out, like, well, what's the next guy gonna think if I print it this, if I print it too close to the edge or whatever. You might want a bigger size sheet or whatever, smaller size, or don't print it close to the edge, give me room to cut, or don't make me cut so many times. Sometimes that's, don't put gutters in there, don't make me cut extra cuts, right? These are things that people might get frustrated about, because it takes more, it's stupidly inefficient, right? It takes more effort for them, takes more time out of their schedule. But if you understand these things, you can avoid those scenarios. So if you work in a facility that doesn't have great communication from operator to operator, you can have these problems quite easily. Someone has to take on the management of all of this to make sure that everything is flowing smoothly. So yeah, so I always recommend, if you can communicate with other operators. Obviously, it's a waste of time to sit there and chit chat all day. I'm just saying, talk about the job. What is it that you like, in order to do your job. And if there are problems, it's fine if there are problems a few times, but as long as those problems get resolved, you understand going forward, okay, no more of that, I got you. No more gutters, no more extra cuts or whatever, whatever your problem is, whatever it is. Okay. The other communication you might have is pre-press. And again, it depends on the company you work for, but somebody handles the file before you in many cases, most cases, I would say. If you're really small print shop, you might be the one doing it too. But you'll have less, I think you'll have less responsibility. You'll probably have less volume overall as an operator. So it evens out that way time wise. But if you have, if you have, yeah, so if you have a pre-press department that handles your files before you, you may need to communicate with them. You say, well, this is not looking right. It's not coming out right. There may be image adjustments they can make before it gets to you. The Igen has a few small image adjustments that can be made, but no real file manipulation. You might have a third computer that has, is connected to the network, and you might be able to view the file and manipulate it yourself in some cases. But a lot of companies, you won't have access to manipulating the file because that's the responsibility of the pre-press department. So communicating with them on occasion, especially when you're trying to set up a job a certain way, you want to make sure that this stuff, make sure you're on the same page, right? You're on the same page. Pun intended. Okay. Yeah, it's occasionally you'll get files, you'll have corrupt files or something. Occasionally things don't print. You'll have to go back to them and say, hey, I need a new file or whatever. Occasionally something needs to change. The crop marks are on, but they're the wrong crop marks, or there's no crop marks or whatever. There's no bleed. It looks like there should be a bleed, but there's not one. Pre-press can make mistakes, and being aware of printing in general will give you an advantage, detecting those mistakes before they move on. So if you print what they give you, and then it gets to the next step and they say, I can't cut this, I can't, there's no crop marks, I don't know where to cut exactly, and you say, oh, that's bad, right? The Igen does have the ability to add crop marks, but I don't think you can add them with a bleed. You can't. I don't think you can on free flow, but there may be other software that'll let you do it. I don't know. So sometimes those types of things can be a problem. Pre-press. Inventory, again, you might have an inventory person or a material handler person that, you may have to communicate, I need this paper, it's not here, right? I need this for my job, but it's not here at the press. Somebody may have to go, in the warehouse or whatever and get your paper. That kind of thing, or you may have to do it yourself. It depends on the company. And the other one would be Xerox service. You will be fairly regularly communicating with Xerox service. This is a type of press, like I've said in the past videos, that Xerox has divided the maintenance, right? The operator has the most of the responsibility for maintenance, but Xerox has set aside certain maintenance procedures that are only to be done by Xerox service as part of your contract with Xerox. So there are certain things that only they can do, and they do on a regular interval, just as you do them on a regular interval. when they're due to be replaced, they will replace them. But there is a fair chance you will have other problems where repairs need to be made, or even image quality problems need to be troubleshooted. I get stumped, right? There are times when I'll look at image quality artifact and I say, I think it's this, I think it's this. I go through my normal troubleshooting process. And I still can't get it. It's like, I don't know what the heck that is. Like, that is, you got me. So then you would place a service call through Xerox. So right now the procedure is an 800 number. You would give your information, your name. They have, a customer service person that will log you into the computer and stuff and look up your account, and they'll place a service call, and they will be sent. They'll give you an ETA, and then the technician will call you. Whoever is assigned to the job will call you and then say, I'll be there in, whatever, a couple hours, whatever. I'm eating in KFC right now. I'll call you back. Whatever it is they got going on. Eventually they'll give you a call, and then they'll come and begin their process. So at that point, the press is now in their hands, and you probably don't want to interfere very much. They have their own process that they follow. As long as you've communicated what the problem is, they can start from there and start trying to figure out what's going on. You'll need to know, when you place a service call, you'll need to know your press serial number and stuff, your site location, all that stuff, and it's just basic information, and they will pass it on. So the technician Xerox service, they have three support levels. They have their service reps that come out and do the maintenance. If they get stumped, they're going to use their phone a friend, the second level. They're going to use their phone a friend lifeline. Somebody at Xerox will give them a pointer, a tip of what they've tried, what else they can look for. If that person gets stumped, it moves on to the engineer level. Every once in a while, it's pretty rare, but every once in a while, you have some really weird problem that gets escalated to the third level. Okay, so based on your contract with Xerox, that's an ongoing thing. You have a negotiation business agreement with Xerox. Based on that contract, you have expectations for Xerox service. They have expectations for you, right? The operator is kind of in the middle, right? You're not the company. You work for the company. The service technician is in the same boat. We work for Xerox, right? I'm not Xerox. I don't sell the Igen. So the company has an Igen, bought it or leased it from Xerox. They have a service contract with Xerox. And The terms of the contract are probably similar from company to company, but there may be slight differences depending on what was negotiated originally. Print companies in the field, they see it as, well, why should I buy your press when I could buy a different press from a different brand or whatever? So I could go to HP, or I could go to somebody else, right? Kodak. So they have sort of an ongoing thing with customer relations there, but essentially it's completely I don't know. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems with the print industry. There's a lot of problems with Xerox and other companies, and there's structural problems, management problems, toxic workplace problems, treatment of employee problems. All this sort of thing is all over the place. So fresh start. Fresh start. Okay. What else? What else is expected of you as an operator? Doing the maintenance is, you are cleaning parts, you are replacing parts, and you are building or rebuilding parts. Sometimes, like diffuser roll is a big one in terms of building, right? You have to, there's a process for taking, assembling and taking apart the fuser, the old fuser roll. There's a lamp on the inside you have to carefully handle, right? You don't want to break the lamp. It's fragile. So there's some process for building things. The grids, you're putting grids onto the die cores. There's a process. Removing and replacing the wires on the die cores. There's a die core removal tool for a wire removal tool. You're handling materials, paper. You may have responsibilities for tracking your own progress, tracking your own waste. Depending on the company you work for, you may be logging into some sort of machine that tracks your time, tracks the print jobs, separate from Xerox's software, impression counts, all that stuff. Your company might have its own software for tracking that information that you're logging into, or you may be writing it by hand somehow. You might do it for yourself, but you might do it for the company. It depends. It depends on who you work for, what their expectations are. Obviously, troubleshooting is part of your process. You will have problems. That's normal. You will always have an image quality problem to work on. You will always have something that's not right that you have to correct. You'll have periods of time where things are moving very nicely, smoothly. The Igen is really good compared to all the other presses in the print field. The Igen is pretty good at maintaining color quality over long periods of time, large volumes. But it struggles with that high coverage stuff. It struggles certain types of stocks, certain colors. But overall it's really good compared to other presses that require more downtime, more maintenance in order to maintain image quality. Igen is pretty good. So you might get into a nice groove where everything is nice and smooth for long periods of time, or several days, a couple of days, whatever. Call that a long period of time. But then maintenance is starting to be needed, and something is happening. Right, you can create your own problems many times just by mishandling, not paying attention, or whatever. Like, a lot of times you are, oops, I didn't put that in correctly, and it caused image quality problems. Right, like that's something you have to avoid. You're working to avoid in the months of beginning to operate this press. Right, you will make these mistakes in the beginning, but you're trying to eliminate them by figuring out the correct way of handling things so that they don't happen. And you want it to be second nature, how to do all these procedures, so that it's just like, okay, I know what to do when it's needed. Okay, what else we got? Logging information. I was talking about logging. You might log for the company, you might log for yourself. One thing you should probably log, this is not necessarily expected of you as an operator, part of your responsibility, but you should do, especially when you're learning this press. But I would do it the entire time, even if you're 10 years into operating this press. I would do, I would record every problem that requires you to troubleshoot. In other words, anytime you have a problem and you don't immediately know what the solution is, um, I would log that. Any image quality artifact that stumps you, especially, I would not only would I log that by writing it into some, either on the computer or writing it by hand, at image quality artifact log, or service call needed log, or troubleshooting log, or something like that. I would actually, I would write any fault codes that the press is giving you. I would write whatever information is showing up in the administration tab, if anything. It's all useful information. I would write the steps you took to solve the problem, and then write what did solve the problem. And then I would also keep a copy of that image quality problem. Whatever you printed out, keep that sheet of paper and put it in some sort of binder or something with all past image quality artifacts. You can number it, say it's this number in the fault log, or the image quality artifact log, whatever you want to call it, as a reference. Because you will get the same image quality artifacts. They may come back later. There will be some that you will get regularly, and you'll get used to how to solve that problem, but you may have some that they only come once every couple of years, even. Like, oh, I remember that a long time ago, but I forgot how to solve it. If you keep a log, not only are you going to be able to quickly figure out what the problem was and how to solve it, but you'll be building your own skill faster. It's something that I learned as years went by. Like, oh, if I had done that, I wouldn't have forgotten. You don't realize that some of these problems can come back later, but they can. There are some things that only happen once in a while, and they can happen for different reasons. You can have a defective part, even. You can have a sensor that breaks, or like a switch, the fuser web. I'm thinking the fuser web switch can break, or it can get bumped and then it's off. Say right now, the fuser web, I'll just quickly explain that, but the fuser web, it automatically winds itself of new fresh web material, and then there's a switch that tells it when it's getting low on material. And then it'll tell the operator on the active status list, fuser web low, right? And that means okay, next time the press stops, or when the next time I do maintenance, I'm replacing the fuser web. Well, if that switch is not operating correctly, it may signal at the wrong time. It may say it's low when it's not low, or it may not signal at all, and then the web completely breaks off of material, and then the roller underneath the material is exposed, and it starts getting chewed up as it continues to move, and it flakes off and makes a big mess in your fuser. And you have to do quite a bit of cleaning to get that back. Right, that's like one potential problem that, it might happen once in a while. It's not supposed to happen, but that switch can be manually reset. So it can also be manually bumped. If it was handled roughly, it may move on its own, or it may break, or whatever, and that screws up the whole thing. The springs can pop out, something like that can screw up, and you may forget why. You may forget, you're not responsible for that switch, right? That's just another component of the machine that is not part of operator maintenance. It's supposed to work, but if it fails, now it's your problem, right? Now you have to say, well, what's going on, right? And you place a service call or whatever. But if you understand how it works, if you've seen this before and you've got a log, then I know what to do, right? It makes you a much better operator because you're saving a lot of time. If you have to place a service call all the time, then you're wasting time, right? You're trying not to place service calls if possible, right? You're trying to make sure that this stuff is good to go before you place a service call. Or sorry, you're trying to make sure it's not good to go. You're trying to make sure that you can't figure it out, and then you call if you can't figure it out. Now, it may be advantageous to put a call in because it takes time to get a response. It may be advantageous to call and then say, well, I might have to cancel this because I might figure it out. That happens sometimes. It depends how quickly you think you can figure out a problem, or you can't figure out a problem. So you go through your troubleshooting, and either it works or it doesn't. And then you pass it on to the big X. Yeah, the other thing is to log if the service call is placed and a technician comes in and he fixes the problem. um, then try to record if he can, if he is willing to tell you what he did. That is very useful information. Say, how did you get it? How did you figure it out? He might tell you what he did, and you say, well, I'm going to write that down because maybe it's something I could do. Or you could even ask him, is this something that a normal operator could potentially do? And he'll tell you, well, no, because you need access to something or other, you need to whatever the reason is. Or he might say, yeah, you could. All you have to do is this. He might even show you how to do it. And then that's a win-win in your eyes, in his eyes, like maybe, potentially. It's good for you, right? It's definitely good for you. It's good for your company to be as efficient as possible. Um, the service calls probably, depending on the nature of your contract, um, there are contracts where you have to pay for your service calls. So you're paying for each call, but there are also contracts where you're covered for a certain time period. You might have 24-hour coverage, or you might have, 8-hour coverage, or whatever it is. That it's already as part of your contract and they have to come in anyways. So you may see that as advantageous, to just call. They're coming in anyways. But it's still a waste of your time. We're paying for it anyways, but we're also paying for the loss of time. And a technician is not necessarily trying to be as fast as possible. The technician is making sure he gets it right. So you're going to be down for hours and hours, potentially the whole day. Potentially longer than that, depending on the severity of the issue. It may drag out. So if you can avoid that downtime, it's good for it's good for your company. It's good for you. But okay. Next up on the list is when you're handling products, you might want to wear safety goggles. I never wore them, but Xerox provides an Igen kit. When you buy the Igen, it comes with goggles and some other materials. You may want to wear them when you're doing maintenance on the press, because there's a lot of material that's floating. There's ozone. There's your toner developer material. Regular paper dust. And paper dust, is not always clean either. Some of this paper can sit on a shelf and collect dust from, years of warehouse, whatever. It's not always healthy to breathe in. So you may want to wear a mask. You may want to wear goggles. Gloves. You might be wearing vinyl gloves or something similar, latex, or some. You could have your own workman gloves. It may be beneficial. If you're handling the fuser roll, you might want to use heat resistant gloves, especially if you're working in the fuser while it's hot. and you know that there's a risk of touching something, you're going to want heat resistant gloves. Otherwise, you'll learn how to handle things so that you don't touch anything. Um, that takes time. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap this up in an hour. That's good. Just trying to scan over what else might you be responsible for. It depends on the nature of your company, They may have other task for you or something that may be software related. It depends on how demanding your job is. If you're going to be printing all the time nonstop, then that might be all you have time to do, anyways. But if you have sort of this up and down cycles, then yeah, there's a potential that you have other responsibilities. Keeping things clean, keeping the workplace clean, keeping the press clean. You might be vacuuming in the press. You will be at some times. Cleaning surfaces. Um, Parts, maintenance. Setting up more print jobs, organizing. You'll dispose of your waste materials, your waste developer bottles, your waste toner bottles, your empty toner bottles, um, empty fuser oil bottles. There'll be some sort of handling for waste material process or recycling bin of some sort. Um, sometimes I would be boxing up the waste toner bottles, putting them back in their original box so that the material doesn't get everywhere and stuff. Vacuuming. Depending on the company, you might have other responsibilities. You might be operating other machines and stuff. You might be operating more than one Igen. It's possible to run multiple iGens. It all depends on what you're running. If you need, some things you're gonna need your full attention on, but these long run jobs that don't require a lot of maintenance, you could have multiple iGens going, and you could operate them all. Just try to keep them running as much as you can. It's possible. Um, you might operate another press at the same time as an iGen, a different press. I mean, it's possible. You have to be proficient at both presses. If you know what you're doing, you can do it. But it all depends on what you're running. Some things need your full attention, and that's the way it goes. Okay. So I think that's it for operating. Ugh. I think that's it for operating the press for now. Next time we will talk about maintenance procedures. I haven't really thought about what order I'm going to go in. The order doesn't matter at this point. It really is just getting to know each maintenance procedure. Xerox does provide some instruction for maintenance procedure, but not super detailed instruction. If you go through Xerox certification program, you will have hands-on practice with maintenance procedures. Obviously, I can't give you that through a video on YouTube, but I can't even show you the press because I don't have one here. But I can tell you exactly how to do it, and you'll get the right information. And it will take time to get comfortable at these things. A certification program is not, it's not enough time to be good at something, to be qualified as a good operator. It's just simply not enough time. But okay, so that's that. I'm going to stop it there, and I'll just start posting videos of each maintenance procedure. I might do a separate video talking about maintenance. Yeah, I think I should probably make a video just speaking about maintenance and then talk about each individual procedure. That makes sense. Okay. See you next time. Go take a lunch break or whatever.